Welcome to the All Things Wildfire podcast, where we delve into the latest trends and hot topics in protecting properties against wildfire. So sit back, relax, and join us as we arm you against disaster.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of All Things Wildfire. And today's guest is Steve Orr, and he works directly in the state of Colorado as a community risk reduction specialist. He's going to share some really good takeaways and also some of the experiences that he's had in the recent wildfires that have taken place in the state. So welcome, Steve. Thank you for making time. Appreciate you getting on to share some of your experiences and some of the golden nuggets that Colorado is doing right now with wildfire prevention.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I've really been enjoying the podcast. So thanks for having me, and thanks for having the podcast. Great conversations.
Awesome. Yeah. Love to hear that feedback. Speaking of which, if you are listening to this, or even watching on YouTube, please subscribe, do your like button, and that way we can continue to send the message out to more people. Yes. And so I wanted to touch base, Steve. You know, we can talk about what you're doing there now. Why don't you give us a little history, though, so we can kind of set the stage as to your expertise and what you've been able to accomplish?
Yeah, I started my fire service career in 1999 with West Metro Fire-Rescue in Lakewood, Wheat Ridge, Morrison, Colorado, which is basically the southwest suburbs, edge of the city. It butts up to the foothills. Here in the Front Range. I worked as a firefighter paramedic. I was with them for 22 years. I spent quite a bit of time on the ambulance early in my career as a paramedic field instructor. They, I'll probably say we sometimes than they, because I'm no longer with West Metro, but we have ALS ambulances, and that was a big part of that was really our bread and butter. 70 to 80% of our calls were medical calls, just like many of the suburban fire departments across the country.
Exactly.
But then I got really involved with the Wildland Fire Program. I think the first fire assignment I went on was can't remember the name of the fire now, but it was in Wyoming. I went out on a Type 6 engine. I think this was 2005 or 2006, and just really enjoyed the experience, and it just really was a part of firefighting that really appealed to me. Just my background as an outdoors person and mapping and just some of those different challenges. So I worked mostly out of our Station 9, which was our wildland hub, where we did a lot of the we're responsible for all the training for our department, a lot of the equipment. We managed the fire assignments, a lot of different things. We really were running a wildland division out of that station. So it grew a lot over the years. And one of the things that I started getting interested in was wildfire mitigation. And that was a result of going on a couple fires in 2012 and 2013 that were really destructive here in Colorado. And one was the Black Forest Fire in 2013 outside of Colorado Springs. The other was the High Park Fire in 2012 outside of Fort Collins. And then right during that time, the Waldo Canyon Fire occurred, which was a fire that was in the forest west of Colorado Springs and ended up getting into the community and destroying 500 plus homes in a residential community. So
let me ask you, because those are like three fires within a 2-year span, right?
Yeah.
Unprecedented up until that time. Okay. What impact did it have on you to say, wow, I really should be redirecting my efforts or my thoughts or my focus somewhere else? What did that do for you?
Great question. And seeing homes destroyed is really sobering. You know, we see a lot of different images. We see images all the time, you know, with all the technology and the screens. But to stand amongst smoking foundations, as I say, and seeing just the absolute destruction of a home And then there's a visceral, it's a visceral experience, and there's a smell as well. A lot of different senses involved, and it really like stuck with me.
And then what about the families? Like, because Steve, I've been on the other side too, right? Because we respond after the fire to try to help people pick up the pieces and rebuild their homes and all that. But I've seen them, weeks after the fire. You see them days after the fire. How is that emotionally? Like, what are they going through?
It's devastating. It's really hard to put into words, and I think that it affects firefighters as well. Like I said, just walking through or sifting through the ruins of the house. We're not necessarily doing the restoration kind of stuff you do, but just putting out hot spots, and there's parts of furniture or different possessions that are either completely turned to ash or, again, partially destroyed. And it's just, it's really a wow experience. And I think one of the biggest things that impacted me during the Black Forest fire is that on the first day we arrived, it was pretty extreme fire behavior in the canopy. So like an active crown fire that moved through the community and destroyed quite a few homes. One of the things that really impacted me was the following day, so like 24 hours after the fire front has passed, there were homes that were igniting and burning. And the concept that we had been teaching or learning about was that it's not just the fire front, but it can be embers, of course, traveling some distance in front of the fire, but also low intensity surface fire after the fire front that is creeping and could ignite a part of the structure that then destroyed. So seeing homes go up 24 hours after the fire front passed was really, I don't say shocking, but it hit home, those lessons and those things that we had taught. And then there was one part of that community that was newer, the homes were built out of more non-combustible materials, and only one home in this, called it an enclave, the smaller community, was destroyed. And we saw, a lot of those pieces came together during those experiences. And then I think the key thing was when I went back to our district and I started looking around, especially on that western edge of those communities, the conditions look really similar to those in those other fires that had massive destruction. And what I realized is that we needed to do some work to raise awareness about the wildfire risk, and we needed to start working with residents to make those changes and start mitigating and preparing for wildfire. I think the sentiment was these large destructive fires, that happens in California.
Right.
And then when those fires occurred right along the Front Range, we'll use the term wake-up call, but people have a short memory. So you can kind of get some momentum right after those fires, but then if we don't have continuing destructive fires, which we didn't have as many for another 6 or 7 years, it kind of went back to, or that's a problem that happens in the mountains, that happens in the forested areas, or again, that just happens in California. So it was hard to sustain momentum and really get people, including people in our department, people that do suppression, to really recognize the risk and the potential, and then what can we do about it. So
then the Marshall fire hits. Okay. Yep. Another unprecedented wildfire in your state. And it was really kind of astonishing to see some of the videos that were going viral online about, people in stores running out of Costco, running out of retail stores, in the parking lot, grabbing their children, rushing out, and there was chaos. There was just chaos everywhere. And so I know that you were still part of that previous, West Metro Fire Rescue Division. Right. And you said when you and I spoke earlier, you were about to go into retirement, but Marshall Fire happened. And then what changed for you? Yeah. Because it sounds like there was a click or something that I would imagine that you felt in your heart, you've got to do something different to make a more significant impact, is my guess, is how I take it, by you making this shift over to the wildland fire mitigation professional position. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, for sure. All along, these communities that we're talking about, Denver, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, Boulder, we're all positioned at basically the western edge of the Great Plains. Okay. We are on the edge of where the Great Plains meet the Rocky Mountains. And so the predominant fuel type is grass. All along, again, this Front Range, I think we all knew that a wind-driven grass fire, which is a very common type of incident, especially in the fall, when the grass fall through the spring, when the grass is dry, it's cured out. And if there's not snow on the ground, we also get significant winds. The Marshall Fire was a somewhat extraordinary wind event, but we commonly get wind events that are in the 30 to 40 mile an hour range with gusts to 50 common. Or 60. So we knew that a wind-driven grass fire would impact a community along the Front Range. I don't think anyone thought that 1,100 structures would be destroyed, but it was really an eye-opening experience for many of us that, yes, it can happen here in the grasslands. And, well, what can we do about it? So there's been a lot of emphasis on grasslands management as a piece of the puzzle. And so some of the folks in this industry have been working with some of the other folks from the Great Plains Fire Science Exchange that have done a lot more work and research into grassland fires and management. So we're looking at what are the different options, whether it be grazing, sheep, cattle, right. Prescribed fire, of course, mowing, different types of treatments, and what can we do on a fuels management standpoint that not only is going to reduce the fire risk, but we also have to, these lands are being managed for recreation, aesthetics, wildlife, and so there's just some competing interests, but there's a lot of attention and efforts on trying to better manage the fuels component. But then the home ignition zone piece, that's one of the pieces of the puzzle that we're really emphasizing our department, because there are things that people can do to prevent their homes from igniting.
And let's talk about those things, Steve,
for
right?
Sure.
Let's get that, because look, I think in California, they're probably leading the way in the things that have to get done, but it's great to see other states taking on some of those suggestions and saying, yes, we are going to now begin to provide more information to homeowners as to what they can do. And so what are the things in Colorado that you guys are preaching to homeowners to be able to mitigate for wildfire?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of this goes back to the work of Dr. Jack Cohen.
Yes.
You probably are familiar with.
Absolutely.
The groundbreaking research that he did in the 90s, actually, over the last several decades. And then, of course, there's been a lot more case studies, many of which are from California, of course. And then all the laboratory studies that have been going on with IBHS, NIST and others. We have some really good information about how homes ignite during wildfires and what people can do to modify their home and their property to reduce the risk of that occurring. So we really try to focus on science-based, proven methods. So I'll talk about the Marshall Fire one of the things that was really a significant contributor to home ignitions and fire spread was wooden fences, some of which really ignited and allowed a pathway directly to homes where homes ignited. And then also those cedar wooden fences are a great source of embers that travel downwind. So the best practice would be to not have a combustible fence at all. So there's a variety of different materials, and that industry I think is really going to grow as far as some metal options. For instance, there's just a lot of people building cedar picket fences. That's kind of the most common.
Right.
But if you can change your fence to have a non-combustible fence, that's really great. But if you can't afford that or don't, that's not part of your budget, the NIST studies and others have shown that if you replace the final, we say 5 feet, now NIST is recommending 8 feet, the last 8-foot section that's attached to your house with something non-combustible, that goes a long ways towards preventing your home from igniting.
Boom.
Roofs, the use of shake shingle roofs were outlawed, for lack of a better term, decades ago here in Boulder.
Okay.
We're seeing vulnerabilities with wood siding. In some cases, there is still cedar shake siding on some of the homes that were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So replacing your siding with non-combustible materials such as cement fiberboard is huge. And we also have the message of, if you can't replace your all of the siding in your home, if you replace the lowest 6 inches, I think that's the IBHS standard. Although I think NIST is saying maybe up to 24 inches, but so at least the bottom 6 inches should be non-combustible. That goes a long ways for preventing ignitions from embers and things that accumulate at the base of the walls. And then we see a lot of wood decks, and those, especially when they're ground level, it can be hard to clean underneath them. So enclosing the underside of your deck, keeping the deck underneath the deck clean, because those are the spots
From debris,
where leaves and needles accumulate. And then also in those junctions where you have a deck connected to, combustible siding, that's where all the needles and leaves accumulate. So if you can keep that clean at a minimum, which doesn't cost anything, or replace those materials, or what can I do to prevent that deck from igniting, around the perimeter, and having nothing combustible within the first 5 feet. All of those are really the things we're seeing the most of.
Got it.
As far as the recommendations we're making.
Steve, what about vents? Are you guys making
of course.
recommendations?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Soffit vents are pretty common here. We do see some gable end vents, and then of course the roof vents that are the outflow vents. We absolutely suggest that you either use 1/8 inch or finer mesh screening, because that is starting to evolve a little bit. We used to say 1/8, but 1/8 or finer, or of course the flame and ember resistant vents are another great option. So depending on one's budget, what are the other recommendations we're making? We try to help people prioritize, because we know that people may or may not have an unlimited budget to do all those things.
Yeah.
But
Steve, I think. Did you have something else? I'm sorry.
Nope. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, like the gutter guards. You're probably doing that too. But I want to touch on the affordability, right? Like, or more so the prioritization of this wildfire mitigation at the homeowner level. And it sounds like we understand as wildfire professionals in trying to mitigate as much as possible. We understand, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, if you were to do these 5 things, you are going to increase your chances that your home will survive. However, that budget might be X, and now they're saying, I don't have that budget. And so now, they're prioritizing what's important to them. And sometimes financially, that's the thing. Like they can't afford it. The other thing that I see is that oftentimes this is forced onto them because their current insurance policy holder is saying, the insurance policy or the insurance company is saying, hey, we are going to non-renew you. So then they're faced with this big old bill like, hey, you're going to spend $10,000, $15,000, whatever it is, to make your home wildfire resilient. And it's forced upon them because the carrier is saying you must do these things. How are you balancing the communication with the homeowner to say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is what's best for you? And then they're saying, yes, but it's so much money and it's coming at me like automatically. Like, how is that being balanced out? Because we see that same struggle here.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing in terms of financial support. The state of Colorado does have a defensible space and home hardening grant program.
Nice.
It's a pilot program, so we're giving it a try. It wasn't funded at a super high level this year, but the hope is that they will be able to show some positive outcomes and get more funding and continue with that program. Our county has some programs, some of which, so Boulder County has a Wildfire Partners program that's been going for a decade. They recently won the National Wildfire Mitigation Award.
Love it.
Which is fabulous. It's actually like, wow, they should have won this 5 years ago. We kind of assumed they did, Like
that's awesome.
It's long forthcoming. So we work closely with them to try to have consistency with what we're recommending. They have a slightly different structure, but again, we try to really work closely with them so our residents get a similar, if not the same message. They have some funding opportunities for fuels mitigation. They're actually releasing round 2 here this week. Our city is looking at a similar defensible space and home hardening grant program. So that's in process to try to provide some financial support for folks. The insurance piece, we have started seeing in some parts of Colorado, insurance carriers either saying we're not writing any more policies or we're actually going to cancel and pull out.
Right.
That has been happening in like Evergreen, Bailey, at a minimum, up in Jefferson County, just west of where I worked for West Metro. We haven't seen that much in the city. I think I've heard of 1 or 2 people that received letters that were mandating some specific actions that the homeowners needed to take to stay insured. But the insurance topic is a hot one. And, we're doing our best to follow best practices that's science-based, and hoping that the insurance carriers will recognize our program or other programs that are doing these assessments and have some consistency with what they're recommending as well. But I wouldn't say it's the Wild West. It's evolving.
And I got to tell you, Steve, I think that you see here in California, we've been doing this for a while now, and you start to see the repercussions of what's taking place. But I think you're spearheading this in Colorado. And so, if I had to look back and understand what we've had to go through in education with homeowners, I think it's really drilling down as much as you possibly can with homeowners to say, this is what's best for you, not only for your health and safety, but also to manage your expense in the future with managing your own risk, because that is going to have an impact, if not now, in the near future, on how the insurance companies look at an individual home. Is what has the homeowner done to mitigate their risk? Have they invested? Have they been doing what they have to do? So that way they can feel even a little more comfortable insuring the property versus maybe a neighbor that has done nothing. So I think continue to be that cheerleader that you are to help people make those decisions is crucial for what's coming.
Absolutely. We look to California for many things, trying to understand what has occurred there, that what can we possibly anticipate is going to occur here. And actually recently, Fire Adapted Colorado, which is a statewide network of wildfire resilience professionals that I've been involved with for about, what's it been, 8 or 9 years, and actually worked for them for a year after I left West Metro. But they hosted a webinar on insurance, where we had some folks, including Mike Thayer from California, that is one of your former employees, and just to raise awareness about, again, what has happened in California, what are the trends here in Colorado, and sharing that with practitioners. So, and some of our residents attended that as well.
Great.
And we really are at this point doing education. We are not enforcing any code with our detailed home assessments. So we're really, again, trying to provide education, empower residents to take action, and again, basing that all on best practices. And in some cases, people want to drill down into further technical aspects. So I share links to the IBHS videos and studies, the NIST studies, and all that. So we have a lot of resources that we try to connect people with. I also wanted to share that the software that we are using is called Fireside, and they're based in Marin County, and so we are also looking to some of the agencies in California that have been using the software for some time to learn from them. What are the tricks of the trade? What are some new features or new ways to reach homeowners and measure what they're doing? Because that's one of the tricky parts is, how do we measure outcomes versus outputs? Like to say we handed out this many brochures about wildfire mitigation. Okay, that's an output. We've done this many home assessments. That's also an output. But what are the outcomes? So we're really trying to stay in contact with our residents that we've done assessments for. Let us know what you have done, so we can document that, and then also know what are the barriers. Are they financial barriers? Are they, or some of the barriers we're seeing is being able to find a contractor or someone to do this work, because people are not really familiar with some of these retrofits.
Agreed.
They're not necessarily hard, but it's a burgeoning industry that all about. And a lot of the contractors here are busy rebuilding homes from the Marshall Fire or doing big remodels in Boulder, so they may not be interested in a small job.
Exactly. And it's funny, Steve, because for us, Allied Disaster Defense is actually becoming a franchise for this reason, is because we need to teach a lot more contractors about what they can do. So not only can we impact California, but other states, because you're right. The homeowner is going to start Googling who they could use, and they're going to be frustrated, just like they are here in California. They're frustrated because they're having to search for people, but no one's an expert. Everyone, like, for example, one customer said, "Hey, do you do these, install these ember-resistant vents?" They're like, "I don't even know what that is, but I can replace your vents for you. You don't even need that 1/8 mesh. I don't even know who's telling you that." Like, these people, these contractors, they have no idea what's going on. So listen, really quick, before we close, Steve, because I know you're short on time. We're kind of short on time too. I did want to touch on something that you said earlier. You had said that there's an impact when we were talking about, going back and seeing the rubble and seeing the fires that are taking place even after the fact that the fire front's gone. The impact that it makes on the individual, you, me, to be able to see these humans, these people, our fellow citizens, go through the experiences they go through. Speaking now to firefighters and people that are in the front lines, first responders, paramedics, police officers, firefighters, man, mental health is a big deal, okay? And PTSD is alive and thriving, unfortunately, with our first responders. This is a massive problem that I don't think enough people are talking about. I get to see it because I talk to our firefighters that we employ, and I hear these stories, and I'm traumatized just listening to the things they've experienced, but they have in their minds it's being rewound and played again in different areas. How let's talk about that. Like, what?
Yeah.
Do you have any of that experience at all, or is that what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I will share that I'm actually on disability for work-related PTSD.
Oh, wow.
And that includes, and it was not one single event. It's,
Right.
for me, the accumulation of thousands upon thousands of calls, and having those different experiences, and then not knowing how to talk about it, not knowing what to do. You got to get back on the mission. You have a bad call, but you're still on duty. And so, especially when I first started in '99, there was not much, if there was no conversation about mental health for probably the first 15 years of my career. So we are getting a better awareness of this problem and starting to connect people with tools to deal and to mitigate the effects. But the work isn't changing. We're running more calls. We're having bigger fires. That's going to all continue. So, and it really affects us at all levels. I think for the longest time, we thought PTSD was a military combat veteran. Those were the only ones that were really affected. Right. And slowly we've realized, wow, all the different levels of first responders, including dispatchers, it's really can be really traumatic. And then even people at the practitioner level, we're working, I say that like mitigation professionals, when we're working with these communities, and then a fire impacts them, and I'm sure there's feelings of, what did I do wrong? Or I didn't do enough, or just, oh my God, this is just Guilt. A horrible thing. But then I'll even trickle it down further, where I was just doing a home assessment for someone the other day, and they said that they get a little worried and stressed, and he used the word PTSD, when it's windy, because of that wind-driven grass fires, i.e. the Marshall Fire. My son has made similar comments. So it's affecting people throughout our community. And I'll share that, unfortunately, there was also a mass shooting in which I believe it was 10 people were killed at our local grocery store, is it 3 or 4 years? So our community has been impacted by a lot of different events. And so, again, there are tools available. We are talking about it more.
Good.
There are more and more mental health professionals that are what we call culturally competent, that are familiar with our work and the schedule and the types of things that we see and experience. So that's all, like I said, real positive. I think the main thing is talking about it and destigmatizing. We used to think of mental health as a weakness, like dry your eyes, get back on the ambulance. I don't want to hear it. Or just, like I said, just stuffing it down, or alcohol. For a lot of firefighters, alcohol was and is the self-medication. So I feel really bad for some of the older generation, the guys that just didn't have the tools. And my dad was a Vietnam vet. So that whole generation, we just didn't talk about it. So I think all of us are impacted, and we have to, again, we have to talk about it. We have to raise awareness. We have to support one another, because healing can occur. These are not necessarily permanent.
Boom. Healing can occur. I love that, Steve.
Yeah. And there's
that's powerful, man, because to know that healing can occur gives you hope.
Yep.
Because without hope, we can just spiral down into this negativity of, this is never going to end. I'm always going to be impacted by these things. And then you're going to take it out on your family.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy. And really quick, before we leave, I wanted to share, locally here, we had our fire department responded to a fire, and there was a child that ended up dying in the fire, and they had to pull the little child out. And what was amazing is the fire department dispatched someone to the scene after the fire was turned off to speak to the firefighters and say, hey, let's talk about this. And I thought, man, how powerful is that, right? Because you're speaking to the human now, right? I think all of us see you, the firefighters, the police officers, as heroes. Like, these are the superheroes. Nothing impacts them. There is no kryptonite. They are superheroes. But they're human, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that our department, as well as West Metro, who I used to work for, we have in our building relationships with groups. I can't think of the name right now. I'm sorry, but a mental health professional group that has multiple practitioners that are doing annual mental health check-ins, as well as being available for ongoing services. And some of the times they've gone and done ride-alongs, spent time in the station, and just again building that relationship and understanding again what we're facing and the stresses. So there's a lot of different, like I said, resources available, even just like peer support, where we have firefighters that are trained to listen and help connect other members to additional resources. So sometimes people don't want to go see a therapist, and maybe the first step is calling and talking to one of their, well, it can just be someone that's not trained in peer support, one of your brothers or sisters on the department, or there are the peer support folks that have some additional training that are a safe, anonymous, confidential, I should say, place to start venting or sharing or crying or whatever you need to do. So we're trying to really change the culture. And like you said, we aren't superheroes, we're humans. And any of the things that we see and do sometimes are just really horrific and really traumatic. And if you don't, like you said, talk about it, process it. I have examples of how I took it out at home, how I acted out, let's say, and had PTSD, like flashbacks, if you maybe you want to call them, that had nothing to do what was happening at home. It was all stuff I had brought home, and my nervous system was dysregulated and all that stuff. So it impacts our families, and we know the divorce rate is really high. The substance use and alcohol use is high, but there's other solutions. There's other tools, and there's other people that really care. And I mean, I'm happy to talk about my experiences if there's anyone. I actually really feel like that would be a great next step for me.
Boom. So I'm going to just interrupt you here and just let people have it, right? So if you know of anyone, I'm making you available, Steve, right? Because look, honestly, I feel like this could be, like you were saying already, this could be a new added mission to what you're doing with the rest of your life, because the retired firefighters struggle, and police officers and anyone, right? They struggle with, what does my life look like now when I have all of this turmoil going on in my mind? How am I going to process? Thank you for sharing, because I really do believe there is a lot of that happening. And thank you for not only sharing that there's people that you can connect with and professional areas that you can connect with, but guys, look up Steve Orr on LinkedIn. His information's on there. Reach out to him. It would be so powerful to see that this small little podcast has made a difference in someone's life, right? Reaching out to a friend, reaching out to a loved one, reaching out to Steve to just improve the quality of one's mental health, because it's real. It's not fake. It's not a pie in the sky. It's real trauma that's going on mentally. So, Steve, I want to thank you so much for being on the show and for contributing in a deeper way than I thought. So I really do appreciate it. And look, I look forward to having you on in the future, my friend, to see what impacts you've done there with Colorado that are going to be, I know, significant to wildfire mitigation. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
That's all for this episode of All Things Wildfire. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to our show and follow us on social media to stay up to date on all things wildfire. And as always, thanks for listening.